Hello, everyone, and Happy New Year. My name is Nicole Stark from Iowa Astrology, and I'm here with my first video to run through 2026 quarter one mundane predictions. So this is not going to be like a personal, spiritual side of astrology that goes into how it may show up for you in your life or in our lives, but actually on a collective level, on the mundane level. So I'm going to take you through the major transits that will happen in January, February, and March. Then we're going to look at some key players that I think might be affected or might come up. Or, well, we know that they will, because I'm going to go into politics. We're going to look at Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, Mamdani, Jasmine Crockett. We're going to go down that wormhole. We're also going to look into some economic things, because I think that's going to come up in this quarter. And then we're going to end with sort of just like a, I don't know, kind of vague, but trying to be specific about certain things that might come up. I don't have enough time or like space to give you every single chart. So I'm trying to narrow it down to what's most important that I think will happen. This is really just for fun. Me just trying to get research out there that I've been doing. But it's such a big year that I just wanted to break it down into quarter, so that it would just be more digestible. So if that interests you, then I'm just going to go ahead and start. I'm going to share this. Okay. Oh, go back to the beginning here. There we go. 2026 predictions, quarter one. So as you can see, it's just going to be packed. I've tried to like create like this visual here for you. In January, January is just defined by these major conjunctions that are happening. We have through January 6th through 9th, Venus with the Sun, Mars with the Sun, Venus and Mars with each other, and between that all happening in Capricorn. Then on January 18th, we have Mercury-Mars conjunction, which is actually a third in a series of 5. This goes all the way back to October. This conjunction basically kicked off the shutdown fight, and then the second one was the Mercury retrograde, which then ended the shutdown fight. And then now here we are again, which makes total sense because we didn't actually resolve anything from that. So we're getting to it now in January. Both the House and the Senate will kick off their session on the 5th and the 6th, respectively. Senate and then House, I believe. So that's going to have this energy encoded into it, which is just interesting. And then basically in January, towards the end or middle, things start to shift into Aquarius, where they're going to run into Pluto. And that starts January 19th through the 27th. Again, like that continuing resolution bill is supposed to be voted on the 30th, which that's just going to be interesting. And then on January 29th, we have this Mercury-Venus conjunction in Aquarius, which will be the first in a set of 3 for this year. And then when we go into February and March, this is where we get like our big ticket items. We get the first solar eclipse in Aquarius in a series on February 17th. And that portal, so the February 17th, and then it goes to March 3rd, which will be a lunar eclipse in Virgo. So this is our eclipse portal. It will start about a week before and end a week after. And in between, during that, we have the second Mercury-Venus conjunction, but it will be in Pisces, and Mercury will be retrograde. We'll have another Mercury conjunct Mars, but it'll be retrograde, and it will also happen in Pisces. And then we're going to have the big Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries, which if you've been hanging around in the astrological world, you'll know that's like a huge thing. We've been in this sort of time frame with Saturn and Neptune in Pisces since like 2023, and this is kind of like the peak moment of their conjunction. And that archetype has been described as like a reality distortion field. It's also historically a time of a lot of social unrest and upheaval, revolutions, civil disobedience, that kind of thing. So definitely going to be an interesting time for us. And those are pretty, I mean, there's other things that are happening, but those are kind of like the major, those are the major things. And so because we have this, really the feature is like this eclipse cycle that is starting, because it starts with Aquarius. And as we're going to see with our key players, we have a lot of people with Leo Aquarius signatures. So I'm just going to I'm going to go through 5 people. And we're going to start with Zoran, because he has kind of this cool story where with the Cancer new moon, he was elected, like he won the primary election. And then now that it's a Cancer full moon, which happens on January 3rd, it's January 1st today as I'm recording it, and he has been sworn in as mayor. So we've seen that like whole arc with him, which is pretty amazing. So now basically we have 6 months of just like seeing how he's going to do. And then when you get to the next new moon phase in Cancer, it's going to just kick off a whole new series of like the next step in his journey. I like to think of this lunar cycle of new moons and full moons as kind of this ever expanding circle in which we start, like there's a bunch of archetypes and events and things that can happen in one sector of a chart. We can't work on every single thing at one time, but we are trying to sort of, there's this overarching theme or something that we're constantly trying to grow into and express. And so every lunar cycle, we kind of get like a little seed, and then that seed blossoms, and then at the full moon, and then we get the fruit and the reorientation and kind of a new evolution of whatever that is for you that's showing up at a time. So it's just interesting to see that happen with Mamdani. So to look at his chart, we see he's a Leo rising. We do have a time chart. I think it's pretty highly rated. So I'm just going to go with it. But yeah, so he's a Leo rising. He's got a moon in Aquarius, sun in Libra, which I love this. It's like Libra in the 3rd is just like your neighborhood politician, which he was, like an assemblyman. That's how he started out. Another key thing I want to point out is that he has a Mercury-Mars conjunction natally. And when he like kicked ass at that debate, that was when Mercury was conjunct to Mars the first time. And he just totally nailed it. So it was definitely very prominent in his chart, and we can see that here is like a core facet of his personality. A couple of things that I just want to highlight is just that, so we have this full moon, he's mayor now, we're going to see how he does. So how is that going to go? Well, one of the things that's going to come key for him, I think, is like who he is. The whole Islamophobic thing was a thing while he was running, but there's something about that core wound that comes into forefront, especially in June, as Chiron will actually ingress into Taurus, and his Chiron at 8 degrees of Leo, so we start to get this square. So I think his status as an immigrant is going to come into focus, And I honestly hope that this is a really healing time for New York and for everybody. I know people have their prejudice and their superstitions and everything, but I think if we have like a high quality person who is just also happens to be Muslim, I think that could be very healing for New York City. So I'm hoping that that's how that will manifest and not in some other way. But with this first eclipse cycle, we are going to see that come into focus in his seventh house here. And with eclipses, solar eclipses, the moon kind of takes precedent. So it's kind of going to elevate his Aquarius moon next level, which is very much like it's fixed thought. Like he is here with an idea and he wants to see it through. And it's an idea that values, he's really showing the more higher manifestations of Aquarius, I think, where it's like just equality for all people, like a real people's person. And so that's just going to come up. But it also, the seventh house is about open enemies and opponents and things. And so I think there could be a fight that really starts with the eclipse for him. So we'll see. So it's kind of like the fight brews first over here, and then in June we have something come up with that wound, kind of opening for us all in a really public way in June, and then the end of the year, the Venus retrograde might be kind of big for him because it's angular, so it's going to go over his Mercury and his Mars, and then it's going to station direct and conjunct his Sun, basically. So that's kind of a big time for him as well, which I'll get into later in the quarter. But I just wanted to kind of give you a brief overview. But we're really just focused on, I think, the first part of in this quarter, what's going to happen for him are these eclipses that are going to happen in the seventh and in the second, which the second house is really interesting. Like, if as the leader of a city, what is that going to talk about? Like, how people earn their money that live in that city, how he earns his money, opponents and income maybe coming into effect, perhaps the goodwill between him and Trump breaks down, and Trump does follow through on his original threats of defunding the city for one reason or another. I don't know. Just throwing it out there. And it's just really startling, too, then when we go to Donald Trump's chart and we see that he is also a Leo rising. But his Mars and Pluto are here, so that makes sense. It's just like this overtly like shadowy side of the like really big masculine energy. It's very showy, very, I don't know, it's gross, honestly. I do not, I'm a pretty progressive person, so just take that with a grain of salt that you are going. That is my bias that is being filtered through here. But there's definitely a lot of power and energy with Mars and Pluto in the first. And I think that is going to make this overall eclipse cycle a little stickier for him because it's going to bring in conflict and power dynamics into the forefront, and as it is angular. So the other interesting parts are Trump also representing the nation as the nation's leader. This Mercury retrograde in Pisces is going to go through his eighth, which is about taxes and debts, and it's a Mercury Venus conjunction over here in the seventh with his opponents and contracts and legal things, and it's going to go into his eighth space of like basically like passive income, and Mercury is going to retrograde through there. So that's just going to be interesting to watch. I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the economic section of this presentation. The other thing that's kind of coming for Donald Trump is late April. Uranus is going to go into Gemini, so we're working on a Uranus conjunction for him. His North Node is there, his Sun is there. I mean, he's already very, like, Uranus is just very individual. It's like hyper individual, shouting my ideals, like those, like that mad tweeting that he does, like, just makes total sense when you can see this. But that can be good for some. It can also be detrimental because you can really begin to isolate yourself when you have too much of a concentration of Uranian energy, and that's going to come into his groups and alliances, which would be the Republican Party. Which again gets interesting when we look to J.D. Vance, who is also a Leo rising, but his Leo rising has Venus, which baffles me because you would expect him to be better looking. I said that. Anyway, but I guess it's funny when I look at this, I can kind of see J.D. Vance's like earlier liberal tendencies. Just in this really well placed Mercury in the second house, and he wrote this book about his story. We have like this kind of very proud love, like just proud ideals, maybe with like Venus with the values like right there front and center. Again, a little bit showy, a little bit dramatic, a little bit of a princess. Maybe that's how it manifests. He is kind of a little bit of a princess. Yeah, so that's just really interesting. And so when you consider this eclipse cycle, I think it might go better for J.D. Vance in terms of his future than it is going to go for Trump, just because of the presence of a benefic here rather than a malefic in Donald Trump's case. But we'll just see how that breaking right starts to happen because they're showing up in the same areas of both of their charts, which is just interesting. The other person who I don't have a birth time for him, so that's why this looks this way. So don't pay attention to the rising sign here. But do pay attention to the fact that he is an Aquarius sun and a Leo moon. So yeah, Mike Johnson, big year for him too. And where we are right now in his story is that he is kind of losing control over his party. So my question is around the February eclipse, if we just don't see major calls for him to in his leadership, there's already like little rumors and whisperings that people are unhappy with the way that he's been leading because he's basically just like a puppet for Trump. And because Trump's approval rating is so low and we are in a midterm cycle, it just might not go well for him if he can try to strong arm for Donald Trump. But I also think he could align himself with J.D. Vance. He could kind of flip in that way. There's just two ways this could happen. I mean, this could either be a really, really terrible year for Mike Johnson, or if the eclipses are harrowing enough for Donald Trump, which is going to probably bring into question his weight and his health, like Jupiter moving into the first. You would think it would be beneficial, so that should buffer Donald Trump. But, I mean, there's a way in which, like, at the end of the day, as it stands, Mike Johnson is third in line. So if something did happen for Trump, Vance would be uplifted. And then if Mike Johnson is still speaker, he would then become vice president. I mean, that's how it's supposed to go. So I find it more likely that it doesn't go well for him. But especially because, like, right now, Uranus, it's going to station in February, and it's going to go right over his Saturn, which is an authority. Like it is, Saturn does have to do with authority too. So having like disruptions to his authority kind of funnel into this early Aquarius energy where Pluto is also sitting right now. Yeah, I just see a lot of, power struggles and dynamics ahead for him this year. And then we'll see what happens if he's still around in August. If it doesn't happen in February, we have a set of August eclipses, which will hit in Leo. It'll be a Leo solar eclipse, I think August 12th. So yeah, I think, and the other interesting thing too is just this Neptune in Sag, in terms of religion, and I'm only saying that because the next person we're going to look at is Jasmine Crockett, who also has like a Neptune in Sag here, and both of them are very open about their faith and their Christianity, but they offer two very different approaches to Christianity, and the way that has appealed to them as people. And the reason why I'm even bringing Jasmine Crockett up is because on March 3rd, we also get the first primaries are going to happen in 3 states, which would be Arkansas, North Carolina, and Texas. Both North Carolina and Texas have made efforts for redistricting with their maps. So I think that those 3 elections, or those primaries, and just all of our eyes are going to be on them for a number of reasons, just to see how it's going to play out, like in how many people are going to come out, who's going to have more energy behind them, but then also like how is all this redistricting effort really going to begin to play out? Because we don't know yet until we kind of get there. So I do think that she is a part of going to be a key player. Her progress lunation phase is the same as Mamdani, which is a waxing crescent, which is basically as powerful of a phase as you can get. When we get to the full moon in a progress lunation phase, there is a possibility of defeat because you've already kind of like gotten to the pinnacle, but like a waxing gibbous is still gaining in that energy. So she's got a really strong lunation phase. So I do see her as a front runner in Texas politics, at least on the Democratic side. But what worries me is that then when we look into it, I think this Mercury retrograde is going to be huge. She's going to have to, I think she'll win the Democratic primary, but then she's going to have to try to appeal to a wider audience. And so that's why I think faith is going to be just like a huge thing for her. And maybe that's what kind of gets brought into the forefront in this election series is what type of Christian are you? Are you the type of Christian who wants to help poor people, or are you the type of Christian who weirdly belongs to the prosperity gospel, which is the exact opposite of the gospel? Anyway, I also spent time in Christian faith, so I have a lot to say. But I really like Jasmine Crockett. So I do think, again, she'll get there. She'll have to do some rebranding. But then Saturn is in that Saturn-Neptune energy. It's going to go into Aries. It's going to go over her Venus, her Sun, her Mars. And if you don't know her, she's a really fiery person. So I think that she's going to get advice that's okay, we have to appeal to a wider audience. We want to put faith forward. And you're going to have to mature. Saturn oppositions are a moment of crisis and a moment of maturity. So she's really going to be tasked to rise to the occasion. I do really love this placement of her Saturn with Jupiter in Libra, just because Saturn is exalted in Libra. So it's working at its highest function of fairness and structure and balance and equilibrium. And that, I think, is going to just come to the forefront. She's also a Capricorn moon, so Saturn is important to her as well from the perspective of her emotions and her personality. And so she's definitely ambitious, definitely very serious. So I think we're going to see that side of her come out more, whereas in recent times, maybe we've seen more of this fiery Aries energy. Yeah, and so, and then, oh, yeah, and Chiron kind of going into, it's going to go into its like gestational phase for her in terms of like when it ingresses, she's working on a Chiron return. So I think that is also a time too where spirituality is forefront. She's been in a Neptune square Neptune, which is also this is midlife crisis type of like, what am I doing with my life? Am I living to my highest ideals? Am I doing what I can? And in interviews that I've listened to with her, she's always really wanting to run for the position that she's running for. So I think there's like a higher calling type of energy to her as to why she is running. And so I think we will see that. I hope that she's successful in the full election. We'll check back in later, but at least for now, I think we're going to be talking about this Texas primary, and I think you will all soon know her name. So just because, so that's why just all these figures, right? All these politicians. There's even more, I think, especially with Republicans who are Aquariuses. I just can't get through all of them. But I do think that at this moment, the Republicans are sort of in that Aquarian energy because they see themselves as breaking up the status quo. They are the mavericks and the fighters here to liberate the people. That's how they've branded themselves, which is super interesting. If that doesn't make much sense to you, you also have to remember that Aquarius is fixed thought. So it's not in the shadow of Aquarius is a conspiracy theorist, because when they're young, like that's the shadow of the rebel archetype, is a conspiracy theorist. When you're young, there may be something genuinely that you're rebelling against and something you're really fighting for. But if you lose sight of that and you're just fighting endlessly, you can easily tip into conspiracy theorist mode where like everything is a fight, it's us against the world, that kind of thing. And that is the energy that is getting ramped up this year with these eclipses. So the first one, as I said, February 17th, a solar eclipse in Aquarius, square to Uranus. March 3rd is a lunar eclipse in Virgo, sextile to Jupiter. And just for your radar, the August 12th is the solar eclipse in Leo. And August 27th is a partial lunar eclipse in Pisces. And I do have those charts here. The solar eclipse, you can see here's the sun and the moon in a really tight square to Uranus at 27. So it's really going to shake us up. Like this February is going to just rock our world. We're going to begin to feel the energy. We also have right here, there's that Saturn, Neptune ramping up. One of those things too is moral panic. Like it's like the satanic panic was this time, and it just in like the communist scare, which by the way they never found any instances of demonic anything or even a communist in the Red Square McCarthy era. Like it was literally all hyperbole and just overblown craziness. So I think that this, as I'll kind of word on it later, like this is big for Iran and Israel, I think. Saturn Neptune is historically kind of big for coups and revolutions in Russia as well. So I think this first eclipse is just really unsettling geopolitical stuff that reaches this fever point. Whereas the lunar eclipse is I think going to be more financial in nature. And so I'm about to go into that here, but just so you can see, we have Pisces Virgo right there, the node at 8 Pisces, and we have Venus retrograde. It's done its conjunction, but it's still within orb of Mercury retrograde conjunct Venus. And then that Saturn Neptune energy is still present, starting to break apart. Uranus is kind of chiming into the Venus story, as well as the Mars square. And later on July 4th, we're going to get Mars conjunct Uranus in Gemini right here. So I think this, again, why I think that there's going to be like a big geopolitical fight that breaks out. SCOTUS may rule on tariffs at that point, which could throw some things into chaos. I don't know. I find it more likely that they're going to wait on some of their bigger rulings, but this one, the tariff thing, might take precedent. It might come up around this time. But I do see like that. This is like a war mongering political upheaval time period that then triggers the markets into a reaction, which we're going to talk about right now. And the reason why I say this is because I've done some research into stocks, and as we're going to see, the Virgo Pisces axis is important to America specifically with money. Mercury retrograde conjunct Venus are also big for this. The two major crashes that live in our memory are 1929 and 2008. Both of those were Mercury retrogrades conjunct Venus in Libra. In 2008, the bottom had Mars in Libra as well. So that's why I say the big ones hit Libra, and they have these squares to Pluto usually. So I'm not sure, and to me that is like Libra represents banking. So those are times 1928 and 2008 where like the banks seriously fucked up. I don't know that that's this right now in the earlier part. This early eclipse is that it actually kind of resembles last April where we had Liberation Day, and that was like a moon in Taurus conjunct Uranus, and Mercury was retrograde in Pisces conjunct Venus. And so I think that that's just more of how this is going to play out. And yeah, so I didn't want to, I might do like a full treatment sometime of the stock market crashes. It's just requiring more research, and it's a lot of charts and everything like that. But one thing I did want to point out is the chart of the greenback. So this is a rare chart for our current iteration of the US dollar. It occurred in the Civil War. The Union had their greenbacks, the Confederates had graybacks. The Union won, thus the greenback won. But this was basically, the dollar was invented because we needed fiat currency in order to fund the war effort. Of course, inflation was rampant, and it was like really bad economic times with the separation of the like two economic powers, with the South and seceding from the North. But eventually it did win the day, and it's just really important. I'll talk about this more later because I found some fun repetitions of like dealing with currency, specifically in the United States, with Uranus and Gemini. Again, that's happening like April 25th, so I'm going to wait till the second quarter to go into it. Just a little teaser for you. But this is the chart of the dollar. And again, it's not a time chart, so we can't look at like the placements, the rising signs. But as you'll see, it's a Venus retrograde, Mercury retrograde, right on this cusp between Pisces and Aquarius, which is right where the nodes are right now. This is the north node, so it's gathering in the energy here, but it's also going to be eclipsed. the sun is at 19 Pisces, which will be important in a second. And then we have Mars in Capricorn as well. And the moon is in Cancer. So if that seems kind of weird, one of the ways I want to so this is the green backwards chart. We also have the US Natal Chart. So if you can just kind of imagine the moon of the US dollar is in the 8th house of the US Natal Chart. So it's gathering its power in the revenue for, the 8th house is taxes and revenue. And this is America's superpower because we're so large and we have such vast resources economically. We're a powerhouse when it comes to taxes and revenue. And that's what makes the US dollar so secure, literally just because of the size of our population in the country that we are in. And then it's interesting to have Mars in the 2nd house there. I kind of think of Mars and Capricorn in the second, sorry, I can't speak, as corporate power, corporate powerhouse, which could be great, but also we can see how it could be detrimental as Mars, even if it's in good condition, is still in malefic. So there's that. Basically, though, the moon and Mars are in the financial sector of the U.S. natal chart, which I just find really fascinating. And then, the sun of that being here in the 4th, and just the bounty of America's land kind of trining the 8th right here to kind of just solidify what I was talking about. So that's why I think, in the moon signs for the two crashes, 1929 was a Virgo moon, 2008 was a Pisces moon. So we see then it's not just that it's the US dollar, but when it happens in the US, that's happening in this Virgo Pisces axis, of which we have 3 total eclipses left in this axis series. Virgo, I do think of as being, it's ruled by Mercury, so it's more of the accounting. So I do think that's why I think this eclipse, just to go back to the lunar eclipse, that's why I think that this is maybe going to have, it's in March, we're going to be talking about, the economy is going to come into stark focus, and I don't think it's going to be good news. And we can kind of feel that right now, right? The stocks are mostly down. They're more down than they're up right now. We've got financial data that we're waiting on. Of course, it's kind of hard to trust that financial data, but still, it's trying to come out right now. But where this gets super interesting is then if we add in this layer of crypto. And so I have my best educated guess for the Bitcoin birth chart. I'm going to take you through that. So January 3rd, 2009 at 6:15 Universal Time is when the first Bitcoin was mined. Now, Universal Time is not, it's just a scientific time thing. It's based off of, all of our time is based off the prime meridian and how far away in either direction you are from the prime meridian. And that's what gives us our time zones. So in order to get this universal time, I had to come up with a way to do that. And the first transaction we had happened for Bitcoin in Temple City, California. Now, that doesn't need to be anything. That's the only place we have within the ethos of Bitcoin. So that's why you see this date as being January 2nd, 2009, even though it's January 3rd is the big day. But it's so, if we anchor it in some kind of place like California, and then we need to get this universal time at 6:15. That's why I've set this chart to January 2nd, 2009 at 10:15. So again, we're going to have to take things with a grain of salt. Don't treat this as if it is a Virgo rising chart. But I do again, we see the mythos, the Pisces action happening here. I love this 19-degree Uranus. It's like right on the sun of the US dollar, which gives it innovating energy. But when Bitcoin first came out, it's really like an anarchist. Like it's it's an anarchist type of platform. It's there to disrupt the US dollar. So when it first came, it was this thing that nobody wanted to take seriously because nobody wants to weaken the dollar. However, at this point in time, the US dollar is quite weak. So I do believe that we are in an innovative time where we're moving towards a digital currency. And as we can see, the Venus is at this cuspy part of Pisces and Aquarius. So that kind of ties it in with the US dollar even further. So I think they're getting like closer. They're kind of moving closer together. This year is going to be a notable return for Bitcoin, whereas 2018, Bitcoin's had a lot of terrible crashes, and we're kind of in one right now. But 2018 was like epic, and that was a notable opposition for them. But now we're in a notable return. So we'll see. So I actually think that I do think January will see a recovery for markets in general, particularly with crypto. I think that, if you remember back that January 29th, Mercury is direct conjunct Venus in Aquarius right here at the tail end. I do think Trump will announce a crypto-friendly Fed chair, which will probably boost that market and help it out a whole bunch. However, I am a little bit worried about that Virgo eclipse as being something that's going to disrupt the market even further. But I think it'll be similar to Liberation Day, where we will recover. But then again in the fall, just like this year in the fall, we're having trouble. This coming fall is going to be a Venus retrograde and a Mercury retrograde. Mercury and Venus will conjoin each other in Scorpio. And then they kind of move in tandem. They're not together. Like it won't be a Mercury retrograde conjunct Venus and Libra, but they will work in sync with each other, and Venus will eventually back in, and they're both in a station direct on the same day. But again, I'm going to go into that further down the line, but I'm just sort of bringing it up right here because it's relevant in terms of just talking about the economy. So if I were you and you have stocks, I would expect to kind of make gains in January, but I would start to question about protecting your money for, especially for March, if not like mid-February. So as far as first quarter stuff. And then again, I think it will probably recoup, but I would expect to see some economic turmoil. There's lots of turmoil in February and March, but definitely the economy there. So so just to kind of wrap up, these are just like random blurry thoughts that I had for January, things that could happen, right? More planet rising because the Saturn Neptune is getting closer together, potential reasons for war. Um, Mars and Venus together are sometimes indicative of scandals, so I wonder if we'll kind of get some really big Epstein news or something like that. There's lots of like rumors about J.D. Vance and Eric Kirk and some crazy stuff. So, we'll see. It could be fun. It could be very telling. I do hope that we get more transparency with Epstein, that we can and justice for the victims of that. I'm not sure. I said military brand update too with the Mars and Venus because the star points had something to do with like the glorifications of the beauties of the body and like the epitome of human like athleticism. So I guess on a personal level, like that January 6th time would be a good time to start like your own fitness regimen. But I wonder if we'll see something with the military then. I already talked about SCOTUS will return January 12th, so maybe we get something with the tariffs. We talked about the shutdown fight, Mercury and Mars, and obviously healthcare will be back into focus. I have TikTok news because there's the deal for TikTok being taken over by Oracle is set to be done by January 22nd. So that's going to be right in that time frame where everything's conjoining Pluto. Oracle is run by Larry Ellis, whose son runs Paramount. They're friends of Trump. So if, I think TikTok can kind of come into focus as that goes through. And if it does go through in the January timeline, late January, we're going to see some power dynamics. We're going to see some suppression. We're going to see big changes in the algorithm and the way that it's used for surveillance and freedom of speech things probably coming up too. Our favorite vigilantes in America have their trials. Mangione and Tyler Robinson. So keep an eye out for those. They happen on Fridays. I think it looks favorable for them. Definitely for Mangione. Really good news for him. I'm not going to give my personal opinion as far as whether I think that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I just think it will probably be in his favor. And then also too, with like Pluto and Aquarius and everything going into Aquarius, the super flu is on the rise, and Pluto kind of makes things bigger. We saw like COVID kind of blossomed in Aquarius conjunctions way back in 2020. So I don't think we'll have like that level of, I don't think it'll be COVID level, but I do think that the flu is going to peak late January into February with those eclipses probably. And then other things for February and March. Early February, nuke news because Uranus stations direct February 3rd. And then on February 5th, the New START treaty deal ends, which Russia has already removed itself from. But basically, that was what was part of what was restricting nuclear tests and warfare and the development of nuclear war technologies, and that's going to kind of come to an end. Let's see, we talked about the markets, crypto turning point. Trump financials lawsuits, just because, again, like that, the Mercury Venus stuff, it's going from his 7th to his 8th. Aquarius being in his 7th, which does have like a legal contractual twinge to it. And then February, March kind of peak, maybe unrest in Russia because it's Saturn, Neptune, so disobedience here, that which could be because either Venezuela pops or China gets bolder too. So there's lots of reasons for moral panic in our society right now. Lots of crazy things that might happen. But that's all I'm going to talk about for now. So that's what I have for you. We will see what is going to happen. I'm just going to stop sharing the screen so you can see my face. It is now dark. I've been talking long enough. The sun has set, which means it's time for me to go make dinner. But I hope you enjoyed that and the visuals. And I will check in later and all through the quarter. I'll have more videos for you coming up too. So I hope you enjoy. If you did, please like and subscribe. This is hopefully going to be on YouTube. I also am very active, probably the most active on Substack. So if you like to read things, go there. I also have, I'm on a monthly, I go on monthly to Duly Noted podcast with Whitney Will of Star Earth Astrology. She's awesome channel to follow as well, so go do that. We did a big 2022 year ahead, like the whole thing. So if you're like itching for more of our views on that, like you could go there. And I'm also on Instagram, so as under IO Astrology for sort of more personal days. So personal updates and things. Big Stranger Things fan, so I got my little squawk on. Hope you all enjoyed it. And I guess I will see you again soon. And I hope you have a lovely New Year.